Hello everyone, this is Trentim, and in this video you are going to learn all the processes in the PMBOK 6th edition. So if you're preparing for the PMP exam or for CAPM exam, stay tuned, pay attention to this video, take notes, create your own mind map, and let's get started. Okay, so we have 49 processes in the PMBOK guide. And they are organized into processes groups. We already have another video here in my YouTube channel describing each of the processes groups. It's very important that you understand processes groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Processes groups are not project phases. So the project life cycle is different from the processes groups. Processes groups means that we can group processes in a similar way so that we can manage or apply the tools and techniques of these processes together. So we have the initiating, and here we have two processes. So processes are also organized into knowledge areas. Knowledge areas are similar to disciplines. I described these disciplines in another video here. You have the integration, where you coordinate, you supervise the other processes into a coherent plan, into a coherent project management plan and execution. You have scope, schedule, cost, and so on. I'm going to describe all of them here again. As you know, the PMBOK structure for the 6th edition, we have the introduction chapter, then we have the environment, then we have the role of the project manager. These are the three introduction chapters we have, and after this we have the 10 knowledge areas. That's why it starts with integration, chapter 4, the first processes, develop the project charter. So the first thing you should do in your project is to develop the project charter. What is the project charter? The project charter is a document that formally authorizes that you can start your project. This is created or assigned by the sponsor, and you assign the project manager, then you have the authority, you have the resources, and you can start managing your project. In the next process we have in the initiating, once we have the project started, we know the objective, we know the preliminary scope, we have some high-level information included in the project charter, then we are going to do chapter 13.1, stakeholders, identify stakeholders. So chapter 13, this is the 10 knowledge area. We have stakeholder management, and the first process is to identify stakeholders. So why do we do this? From a practical point of view, I will walk you through all the processes, describing how I use this in my daily projects, in my daily activities, so you know what you want to achieve, and you have the authority, project manager is assigned. The next step is to identify who is involved, who is influenced, who can provide information to your project. The end result here will be the Stakeholder Register. So remember that in every process we have the inputs, tools and techniques, and the outputs. So the output here is the project charter, the output here is the Stakeholder Register, and then we're ready to move to the next process group, which is the largest one, the planning. So in the planning, we're going to have many different processes here, so I'll leave it open, and once I include all the processes, then I can draw the rectangle here for the planning. So planning is where we have a majority of the processes in the PMBOK guide, and there's a reason for that, because planning is similar in any type of project. You're going to define a scope, if it is IT project, if it is construction, if it is a human resource project, whatever project you have, you need scope planning, you need to create a schedule, create WBS, and all of those. And as you're going to see, when we move to the execution process group, in the execution we have very few processes. And why is that? Because we have to take the information from the plan and get the job done. You're going to provide direction, direct and manage a project. You're going to manage resources, and that's it. We have few processes if I'm not mistaken, 5 processes. We're going to check it out here as I'm moving and describing how we do. So it is important that as you walk through these processes with me in this video, that you will really stop and think how you can apply and use this in your daily activities, in your daily projects. So let's go. So planning. Remember that every time we have a process related to integration, this should be the process that starts the process group, because you are going to understand better how we are going to do the planning. So we have 4.2, which is develop the project management plan. So develop the project management plan. And you're going to understand that we have a different planning process for all the knowledge areas. So we have another process to plan scope. Let's put project plan here, develop the project plan. And the project plan integrates the subsidiary plans. So we have 5.1, plan scope. Then we have 6.1, plan schedule. So for all the knowledge areas, we have a planning process, and I'm going to describe this right now. So 7.1, plan cost. Then we have 8.1, where we plan quality, resources, then we have 9.1, where we plan quality. Then we have 10.1, communications. 11.1, risk, plan risks. Then we have, let me just get it here, 12.1, plan procurement. And 13.2, plan stakeholder. Pay attention that this is 13.2 because we already have 13.1, which is identify stakeholders. So each of these processes is plan. Plan scope, plan cost, plan resources, all of that. Plan quality, plan communications, plan risk, plan procurement, and plan stakeholder engagement. So pay attention that this should be integrated. That's why we have these processes, which is from the knowledge area integration, chapter 4, then you have chapter 5 scope, 6, and so on, so that you can navigate and understand better how we manage these processes into our daily activities of the project. What do you do in each of these processes? When you're planning scope, you are identifying what are the tools you need in this particular project, taking tailoring and context into consideration. How I'm going to collect requirements, how I'm going to take care of the scope control. When we think about schedule, what are the tools and techniques I'm going to use for estimating? What are the tools and techniques or approach to build the schedule and so on? So these processes, you are going to build a specific plan for each of these, and these plans should be integrated into the project management plan. So it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense if we have the plans and they are not integrated into a coherent plan. So that's why we have planning processes for each of these, and you have to integrate this into the project management plan. So stop for some time here And pay attention to your activities as a project manager. Sometimes you're working a very large project and you have people assigned to different areas. So somebody is going to be responsible for procurement and they know what types of contracts we are going to need, make or buy decisions, all of that. Somebody is responsible for quality assurance, the tools we are going to use, quality control, how we are going to inspect, measure, verify quality. So you could have different people. You as the project manager, so the project manager here, you're responsible for the whole plan, and you can delegate and integrate and also supervise so that you can coordinate all the plans here. All right, so that's it. Let's move to the next processes. So the next step here is 5.2. We are going to collect requirements. How are you going to collect requirements? You are going to collect requirements based on the definitions you had in the scope management plan. That's it. That's why it's necessary that we create a plan for every different area so that we select the approach, we select who is responsible for that, we identify the tools. You can collect requirements using brainstorming, for example, using processes maps, prototyping. There are many, again, for each and every process, you're going to have many different inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. So the output here will be the requirements document. It could be a matrix, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be a long list of requirements, and maybe, it could be any type of document. Once you have collected the requirements, the next step is to define scope. So when we collect requirements, what we are doing is that we are trying to understand the needs. So I'm collecting information from my stakeholders, understanding what is needed, what are the requirements, and all of that. And then we are moving to the solution. So here we understand the project, or we quantify the needs, quantify needs. And here we're moving to the solution. So we are going to create what we call the scope statement, project scope statement. It is a statement of work or something like this, describing the deliverables, what we are going to do in this project. And a very useful tool, our next process, 5.4, is to create a WBS. A WBS, or work breakdown structure, is a hierarchical representation, so this is the output, is a hierarchical representation of all the project deliverables, all the project work. You have the phases, you have deliverables, you have work package, and this is organized into a visual way so that we can also move to the schedule, plan costs, plan all the other information by creating this WBS, okay? So as we're doing this, probably we're doing the other activities here or the other processes related to the schedule. So once we have the schedule plan where we identify the tools, techniques, and everything we need, then we are going to define activities. So 6.2 here, activities. What are activities? Activities are the tasks. Tasks are related to the work package in the WBS. So I have a work package, for example, I need a report. So the work package is final report, and then I have the activities. I'm going to get the information, analyze the information, create a draft, to get the approval, and then the report is ready, okay? So we have the activities. Activities are related to work package. And once we have the activities, the next step is to sequence these activities. So we have an activity list, as you can imagine. Here we have an activity list, and then we are going to sequence, which means I can have two tasks that initiate together, finish together. You finish one and you initiate the other. So we are going to create a sequence here, which is related to a very important concept in project management. We call it the critical path, so that we know the duration of the project. And the duration of the project will depend on estimating the duration for the tasks. So estimating duration. So once you have all the activities for your schedule, and these activities are sequenced, then we can think about the duration for each of the activities and add up those activities in the critical path so that we get the end result we expect, which is the project schedule. You have a specific process for the schedule. Actually, you're building the schedule, develop the project schedule. You're building this as you're doing the other processes in the knowledge area for schedule. But it's important that we have this as a separate process, because in this schedule you're going to think about constraints, what if scenarios, you're going to do resource leveling, for example, solve over allocation in case you have, and then you have the schedule. Well, you might be imagining right now, so I should conclude all the requirements, all the scope, all the WBS, and then move here. That's not true. Some of these processes, they overlap in an iterative process, so that as you're collecting requirements and you're creating the WBS based on the requirements, you might be thinking about some of the activities. It is important that you adjust as you have more information. So let's move to the other knowledge area here. So plan cost, then we have 7.2 estimate cost. Estimate cost means that we are finding monetary value for the resources needed, and the resources are described in the schedule, in the activities, in the WBS. I need one engineer, I need new facilities, a computer, equipment, whatever resources you need. And these resources are going to come up from the resource management plan, which is 8.1. So as I mentioned to you, these knowledge areas, they are happening at the same time here in the planning, and we are moving in an iterative process, progressive development of our project management plan. So I'm going to estimate costs, and this estimate for the costs are going to be based on the estimate resources. So 8.2 is estimate resources in the activities. Estimate resources. And as you estimate resources, you estimate the cost. So this is something that many people is curious about or do not understand how that works. Why can't we have costs and combine costs with the resources? Usually, if it is a small project, then you can do both at the same time. It's no problem. It's no big deal. But when we have a large project, imagine that you are estimating resources for the tasks and you have 1,000 WBS work packages. I have a project a couple of months ago. We just completed a very large project. We have 80,000 tasks in the schedule. So thinking about getting the resources and also finding out the monetary value of this is not easy. And actually, this is a responsibility for different areas in the organization. So what I did as project manager with the estimate resources is that I went through all the tasks. And in the tasks, I explained it. I need one engineer, 2 technicians, 1 mechanical engineer, 10 computers, I need this, this, and that. And in the end, what we have here in the estimate resources is that we have a resource list. And based on the resource list, which might be a very long resource list, maybe we have 1,000 resources, 10,000 resources, then somebody in the organization would go through the estimate costs, and in the estimate costs they would be able to put monetary value. Sometimes you need quotation, you need information from different resources in your specific activity so that you understand what are the monetary values. So here, just the resources I need and how much I need them, quantity of resources, number of unities or people that I need. And here I'm going to estimate the monetary value for this specific resources. And as I have the estimate costs, then I can create a specific process here, another process, which will be create the budget. So create a budget. So it is important that you understand that some of these processes, actually all of these processes, they happen at the same time. But you as the project manager, you understand what is the role or what are the objectives for each of these processes, okay? So as we estimate resources, we estimate the resources based on the activities or tasks in the schedule. The activities are connected to the work package in the WBS, so everything is connected to the project management plan, integrated into a coherent plan. You have to be careful in coordinating this planning process. We are going now to move to 7.3, where we define or develop the budget. Here we are going to have the S-curve, for example, spending curve. In the schedule, you have your schedule. In the WBS, you have the work breakdown structure with all the deliverables, phases, work package. You could have many levels here. And then you are estimating the resources and planning how you're going to use the resources in your organization. Alright, so now that we have the scope, time and cost, so we have scope here, time, cost, we have the triple constraints, scope, time and cost. These are the baselines. And on the baselines, we are going to now move forward to what we call subsidiary plans. And I just noticed that I made a mistake here. This is chapter 9 for resources, okay? And this is chapter 8 for quality, okay? So 9.2, be careful in paying attention to that if you're building your mind maps. But let's move here. It's important that we have the resource close to cost. In the quality plan, we just have plan quality. We don't have any other processes here. We're going to define tools, approaches, what we're going to take into consideration when we plan quality, when we manage quality, inspection, if you have processes, who is responsible, so roles and responsibilities. In the communications plan, it's similar. We don't have any other processes here. We're going to have processes for the communications related to execution and control, but we only have a single process. We call the subsidiary plans or auxiliary plans, quality, communications, risk, procurement, stakeholder. And here we have the baseline for scope, time, costs, and resources, okay? So all the project plans, they are going to be united, coordinated into the project management plan. And here we plan the approach, what kind of media we're going to use or technology we are going to use for communications, when, how you create a matrix for communication, who is going to need what information, when they are going to need, how they are going to receive this information. So this is important stuff we have here in the communications plan. Here we're going to set up any tools, as I mentioned, if you're going to use control charts or whatever other quality control you're going to use. And in the risk management plan or planning risk, we define the tools we're going to need, analysis, all of that. But here we have many different processes here. We have 11.2, which is identify risks. Here you are going to use many different tools and techniques to identify risks. You can use brainstorming, you can use root cause analysis. Here you are going to create the risk register. You are going to describe the uncertainties, the impact, and all of that for your project. We have another process here, 11.3, which is the assessment. You're going to create a qualitative analysis. So qualitative analysis, you're going to use information about the probability and impact. We create a matrix here. I'm going to create other videos for each of these tools, alright? So I just want to provide you an overview here. But you have a high probability, so probability and impact, high probability, high impact, then I have to provide a risk response for that, and so on. The qualitative analysis means we're using colors, for example, or we are using adjectives, high, medium, low, red, yellow, green, and so on. And sometimes we want to do the simulations, which is 11.4 quantitative analysis. So in the quantitative analysis, we do simulations, 29% probability, the impact will be $145,000, for example. We can create scenarios, we can use Monte Carlo simulation, we can use many different models so that we can quantify the risk before we create the risk response. So in 11.5, create risk response. I'm going to describe risk responses in detail in another video, as I mentioned to you. But we can accept the risk, we can mitigate the risk, reduce the impact, reduce the probability, we can get insurance, transfer the risk, for example. We can try to avoid the risk, making changes to the project plan, so that we can eliminate those risks. All right? So in the procurement, we also have only a single process here. We are going to make have make or buy decisions here. Make or buy decisions. And then you are going to include the processes so that you can conduct procurement during the execution. So maybe in your organization you need a statement of work for different work packages in the WBS. You need, you have a contract template, you have any other information, this will go into procurement. So roles and responsibilities related to procurement. What are the processes? If you have any legal aspects you should be aware of. And in the plan stakeholders, we are going to do stakeholder analysis here. Stakeholder analysis. And based on the analysis, we are going to define an engagement plan. Engagement plan. So depending on the stakeholders, there are different tools here. We are going to use the Stakeholder Register we created in Identify Stakeholders back there in the initiation. And you have high power, low power, you have high interest, low interest. There are different ways that you can analyze your stakeholders and categorize stakeholders so that you can define effective engagement strategies. Okay, so that's the objective here. All right, so this is the planning. We already know the initiation. This is the planning. And I'm going to describe the execution. So pay attention that we have many different processes here in the planning. Go back to each of these processes. I'm just providing an overview. I will discuss each of the knowledge areas as I mentioned in other videos. But it's important that you get this big picture. You understand what happens in the initiating, then you move to the planning. In the planning, some people, they do not know where they are going to start planning, and you start planning 4.2, develop the project management plan. Then you develop high-level plans for each of the knowledge areas. You create the scope plan, schedule plan, cost plan, resource plan, quality plan, communication plan, risk plan, procurement plan, stakeholder plan. Once you have the plans, then you can move to the other processes. You start collecting requirements, defining the scope, create statement of work, WBS, think about the activities and schedule, think about the resources in Chapter 9, think about budget in Chapter 7. Then you have the auxiliary plans for procurement, stakeholder, quality, communications, and risk. Alright, so that's it for initiation and planning. Let's move to the execution and also learn about monitoring and controlling, and how can we close a project in a proper way. So stay tuned, check out the next video, and also share this video, use for your study purposes if you're sitting for the PMP exam, or if you just want to learn a little bit more about project management. Let me know in the comments if you need any help, if you didn't understand any of the processes, and I'll help you in my next videos.